Keanu Reeves walked into the luxury mall, his steps slow, deliberate. He blended into the crowd, dressed simply in a black t-shirt, jeans, and worn-out sneakers. Dark sunglasses covered his eyes, and his hands rested casually in his pockets. Nobody turned to look at him. Nobody whispered his name. To them, he was just another ordinary man wandering through a place where wealth and status dictated importance. And that was exactly what he wanted. The air smelled of expensive perfumes, polished floors gleamed under the golden lights, and every store glowed with extravagant displays. Salespeople in crisp uniforms welcomed well-dressed customers with wide smiles and champagne. But Keanu noticed something else, subtle yet undeniable. A couple hesitated near a boutique, their clothes simple but neat. They stepped in, unsure, but no one greeted them. Instead, the staff glanced at them, exchanged looks, and ignored their presence completely. A woman in designer heels entered moments later, and instantly 3 attendants rushed to her with eager smiles. Keanu clenched his jaw slightly. It wasn't new. He had seen this before. As he walked further, his path was suddenly blocked. A firm voice cut through the air. "Hey, you!" Keanu turned, slow and calm. A security guard stood in front of him, tall, muscular, arms crossed over his chest. His expression carried suspicion, almost irritation. "This isn't a place for wandering around," the guard said, his tone sharp. "Move along." Keanu remained still, unreadable behind his sunglasses. "I'm just looking." The guard scoffed. "Looking for what? This mall doesn't entertain window shoppers." His eyes traveled over Keanu's simple clothes, and his lips curled slightly. "We have a dress code here, and you don't exactly fit the profile." Keanu could feel a few eyes turning toward them. Some customers peeked from the corners of their eyes, pretending not to stare. The employees behind the glass storefronts stole quick glances, but no one said a word. For a long moment, Keanu just stood there, silent, as if studying the situation, absorbing it. Then, without a word, he took a step back, turned slowly, and walked away. The security guard smirked, satisfied. Another nobody removed from a place he didn't belong. But what the guard didn't know, what no one in that mall knew, was that this had just become the biggest mistake of his life. The next morning, the mall gleamed under the golden sunlight, its spotless glass reflecting the bustling city outside. Inside, luxury flowed effortlessly. Customers in tailored suits and designer dresses strolled past gleaming storefronts, their conversations light, their laughter effortless. The world inside this mall belonged to them. Keanu Reeves stepped in again, wearing the exact same outfit, black t-shirt, jeans, and the same pair of worn sneakers. His sunglasses rested over his eyes, masking the quiet intensity beneath. He moved with the same unhurried steps, his hands in his pockets, as if yesterday's incident had never happened. But this time he wasn't just observing. This time, he was paying close attention. It didn't take long for the security guard to spot him. From across the atrium, the man's brows furrowed, his stance shifting. A spark of recognition flickered across his face, followed by immediate disapproval. He squared his shoulders and strode toward Keanu, his boots clicking sharply against the polished floor. "You again?" The guard's voice was laced with irritation, louder this time, as if making a point. "Didn't I tell you yesterday? This place isn't for you?" Keanu tilted his head slightly. "I didn't know public malls had private rules." The guard scoffed, stepping closer, his chest puffed out. "Don't be smart with me. You've got no business here." His voice carried the same authority as before, but this time, there was a thin layer of something else beneath it. Uncertainty. Keanu didn't move. He simply stood, his face unreadable. Around them, the atmosphere shifted. A few customers turned their heads slightly, sensing the confrontation, but pretending to browse. A store clerk behind a perfume counter stole a glance before looking away. Even the janitor wiping the marble floor paused for a fraction of a second before resuming his work. Keanu let the silence stretch for a moment longer than necessary. Then, in a voice so calm it almost felt rehearsed, he asked, "Tell me, What do you see when you look at me?" The guard's brow twitched. "What kind of question is that?" Keanu's lips curled slightly, not into a smile, but into something close to amusement. "It's a simple one." The guard's jaw tightened. He let out a small chuckle, shaking his head. "I see a guy who doesn't belong, and that's all that matters." Keanu nodded slightly, as if confirming something to himself. Then, without another word, he turned around and started walking away. The guard exhaled, shaking his head again, muttering something under his breath. But as he watched Keanu disappear down the corridor, something unsettling lingered in his chest. A strange feeling he couldn't quite shake. Tomorrow, he would find out why. The next day, the security guard stood at his usual post near the main entrance, arms crossed, scanning the crowd with his usual sharp eyes. The morning rush had begun, with luxury cars dropping off polished customers who belonged here, at least according to him. Everything seemed normal, until he saw him again. Keanu Reeves stepped through the glass doors, same outfit, same slow, effortless stride. The security guard's lips pressed into a tight line. This guy just didn't get it, did he? This time, he wasn't going to waste words. With long, determined strides, he cut across the floor, shoving past a teenage boy carrying shopping bags. "Hey!" His voice was sharp, slicing through the polished atmosphere of the mall. Keanu stopped but didn't turn around immediately. Instead, he lifted his sunglasses just slightly, enough to glance at his surroundings. A few clerks at the boutique counter had paused mid-conversation. The cashier at the coffee shop had turned slightly, pretending to arrange the display case, but clearly listening. Even a businessman who had been typing on his phone stole a quick look before returning to his screen. Everyone noticed, but no one interfered. Keanu finally turned, his expression neutral. "Yes?" The guard's eyes flickered with something close to irritation. "I don't know what your deal is, but this is the last time I'm telling you. Get out." Keanu exhaled as if the moment had disappointed him. "And if I don't?" The guard stepped closer, his voice dropping to a warning. "Then I'll have to make you." For the first time, Keanu smiled, small, almost invisible, but there. "You sure about that?" That caught the guard off guard. His frown deepened. "What's that supposed to mean?" Keanu studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "Nothing. Just wondering if you've ever made a mistake so big you couldn't take it back." The guard's patience snapped. "That's it." His hand reached for Keanu's arm, ready to physically escort him out. Before he could make contact, a sharp voice sliced through the air. "Excuse me, what do you think you're doing?" Both men turned toward the source. A well-dressed woman in her 50s, with an air of authority that could silence a boardroom, was marching toward them. Her face was pale, her movements urgent. The guard immediately straightened. "Ma'am, don't worry. Just handling this." "Handling what?" she hissed, eyes flashing. Then, without another word, she turned to Keanu. And this time, the guard saw something he had never expected. The woman's cold, controlled expression melted into pure panic. "Mr. Reeves, I didn't know you were here. Why didn't you—" The guard's stomach dropped. The blood drained from his face. Keanu slowly put his sunglasses back on. "I tried." And just like that, everything changed. A thick silence fell over the mall. The security guard felt his chest tighten as he looked between Keanu and the woman, who was now visibly nervous. The weight of the moment pressed down on him, but he wasn't ready to accept it yet. I don't understand," the guard stammered, his authority slipping through his fingers. Who is he?" The woman shot him a look so sharp it could cut glass. "Are you serious?" She stepped closer, lowering her voice but keeping the urgency. "This is Keanu Reeves, the owner of this mall." The words hit like a freight train. The security guard blinked, his body stiffening. His mind raced through the past 3 days, every condescending word he had thrown at Keanu, every time he had dismissed him, every time he had judged him just by looking at him. His throat felt dry. I didn't know," he said, barely above a whisper. Keanu took a slow breath, tilting his head slightly. "You never asked." The weight of those 3 words sent a chill down the guard's spine. The woman, still visibly shaken, turned back to Keanu, her hands clasped together. "Mr. Reeves, I deeply apologize for this misunderstanding." Keanu said nothing. He simply glanced around, at the employees who had witnessed everything but stayed silent, at the customers pretending not to eavesdrop, at the system that had allowed this moment to happen in the first place. A muscle twitched in his jaw. "I don't want an apology," Keanu finally said. His voice was calm, but the air around him had shifted, heavy, unforgiving, unstoppable. The woman swallowed hard. "Of course, sir. If there's anything I can do—" "You can start," Keanu cut in, his tone never rising, "by calling a meeting, right now. Every manager, every security officer, every employee in this mall." The woman hesitated. "Now?" Keanu slipped his hands back into his pockets. "Is there a problem?" The authority in his voice was undeniable. The woman quickly shook her head. "No, sir, I'll arrange it immediately." She turned and hurried off, pulling out her phone, her polished heels clicking against the floor. Keanu shifted his attention back to the security guard, who was still frozen in place. His face had lost all color. Keanu studied him for a long moment, then took a step forward, close enough that only the guard could hear his next words. "You thought you were enforcing the rules," Keanu said quietly. "But tell me, whose rules were they?" The guard opened his mouth to speak, but no words came, because he knew the answer. And so did Keanu. Tomorrow, the entire mall would know too. The tension in the mall was thick. Employees whispered among themselves as the news spread like wildfire. The owner of the mall had been humiliated by his own security guard. And now, Keanu Reeves had called for an emergency meeting. Within minutes, the entire staff gathered in the central atrium, store managers, clerks, waiters, security personnel. They stood in clusters, some nervous, some confused. The mall had never seen anything like this before. Keanu stood at the center, hands in his pockets, sunglasses still on. He didn't need to raise his voice. When Keanu Reeves spoke, people listened. "For the past 3 days," Keanu started, his voice calm but cutting, "I walked through this mall as just another customer." A murmur rippled through the crowd. "And in those 3 days," he continued, "I saw exactly how this place works." His gaze swept over them. Some avoided his eyes. Others looked down, suddenly aware of their own actions or inaction. Keanu tilted his head slightly. "You know what I learned?" Silence. "Some people in this mall," he said slowly, "are treated like royalty." He let the words sink in. "While others are treated like they don't even belong." The security guard, now standing off to the side, clenched his fists. His breathing was shallow. He knew Keanu was talking about him. Keanu exhaled, taking a slow step forward. "So, tell me." His voice dropped just slightly, but the weight of it was crushing. "Who decided that?" The question hung in the air. No one dared to answer. Keanu pulled out his phone. With a few taps, he pulled up something and turned the screen toward the crowd. Reviews, hundreds of them. "Security follows you like a criminal if you don't look rich enough. I was asked to leave just for browsing. They only care about wealthy customers. If you don't fit in, expect to be ignored." Keanu's voice was like steel. "This is your reputation." The mall manager, who had been standing stiffly near the back, visibly swallowed. Keanu turned to him. "And what do you plan to do about it?" The manager hesitated. I can make adjustments. Talk to the staff." Keanu raised a hand. The manager shut his mouth instantly. "This isn't a staff issue," Keanu said. "It's a culture issue, and culture changes from the top." The crowd shifted uncomfortably. No one had expected this. Keanu's voice softened, but the intensity never faded. "Starting today, things will change. Every employee here, every customer, will be treated with respect." A few lower-level employees exchanged glances. Was this really happening? Keanu took another step forward. And as for those who think they can keep running this place the old way, his voice dipped lower, you won't be running it for long. The message was clear. The security guard, still standing in the corner, felt the weight of every single word. He had kicked out the owner of the mall. And now, the owner was kicking out everything he stood for. The entire mall felt different. The weight of Keanu's words had settled over every employee, every manager, every security guard. Some looked shaken, others relieved. Because for the first time, change wasn't just a promise, it was happening right in front of them. Keanu let the silence stretch, giving everyone a moment to absorb the reality of the situation. Then, with quiet authority, he turned to the mall manager. I want every department head, every security officer, and every store manager in my office by the end of the day, Keanu said. We're rewriting the rules. The manager, still visibly pale, nodded quickly. Yes, Mr. Reeves, absolutely. I'll arrange it immediately. Keanu shifted his gaze to the staff, the waiters, the cashiers, the janitors, the security team, the ones who had no voice in this mall until now. From now on, if any customer, employee, or visitor is treated unfairly, I want to know about it. His voice was steady. If you're afraid to speak up, don't be, because the people who make this mall toxic. His sunglasses caught the light as he turned his head slightly. They won't be here much longer. A ripple of energy ran through the crowd. The ones who had spent years enduring mistreatment in silence suddenly saw something new, hope. And then something unexpected happened. A young janitor, barely 20, raised his hand. His voice was hesitant. Sir, does that mean people like us really belong here? Keanu turned to him. He took off his sunglasses, revealing eyes filled with something real, something human. This mall belongs to everyone, not just the ones who can afford it, Keanu said. If you work here, shop here, or even just walk in to enjoy the space, you belong. The janitor swallowed hard, as if trying to push back years of feeling invisible. But before he could respond, applause broke out. It started with just a few people, then it spread. Employees clapped. A couple of customers joined in. Even some of the managers, the ones who knew deep down that Keanu was right, found themselves nodding in agreement. And then there was the security guard. He stood frozen, feeling the ground shift beneath him. In a matter of minutes, the power he once had, the power to decide who belonged and who didn't, was gone. Keanu glanced at him one last time, his expression unreadable. Then, with the same quiet confidence, he slipped his sunglasses back on. I'll be watching, he said. And with that, Keanu Reeves turned and walked away, not just as a mall owner, but as the man who had just changed everything.